Hey everybody, this is Robert with RC Archery. In today's video I've got 7 tips to help you aim better on target. Alright guys, so for tip number 1, we're going to look at our draw length and our loop length. Now draw length is something that a lot of people look at, loop length is not so much. So there's different factors of this. Basically, I'll put a link in the description below. It'll go back to last week's video. I went over bow shoulder, and looking at that, that's where you're going to get a lot of your stability from. But the second part of that is your loop length. Now your loop length is going to control your horizontal angle of your elbow, so whether it's further out to your right or further behind you out to the left. But it's also going to help you be able to lock yourself in on target. So when we talk about locking in, what we want to do is have our chest out and our shoulders back. And what that's going to do is allow you to have bone-on-bone alignment all the way from the bow hand, through the elbow, through the shoulder, across to your release arm shoulder, and then have all that locked in place where the bow is not trying to collapse you in. That's going to make you a lot steadier on target. It's also going to help you not have as many dip bangs because you're not going to be losing that tension in the back end and letting that sight picture drop down. Now what I do and what I would recommend anybody that I work with doing is studying your float. If you haven't seen any of those videos where I talk about that, I'll put a link in the description below for that as well. That's a huge factor of it. Try out some different lengths, micro tune everything, and just like I talked about in my instructional video, once you have your draw length basically set perfect, use your limb bolts on your bow to be able to back that in and out in small turns, quarter turns or less, and use that to be able to see what it does to your float picture. See if it gets better, see if it gets worse. And what that's going to do is help you find a perfect fitment for your bow shoulder to be out or in, and find that middle zone on there where everything just kind of compresses together and holds you steadiest. For an example of what this needs to look like at full draw, I'll splice in a picture of me, and that way you can see the points on my bow shoulder, how my arm is aligned, also on my release arm, my shoulders being relaxed and down, and all the alignment throughout the bow. Alright guys, so tip number 2 that I'm going to talk about is your cam timing. Now this is not cams hitting at the same time or the way that the let off and everything is, but this is looking more at a hybrid system and how to use the hybrid system to your advantage to help you hold steadier on target. So let's talk about this for a second. I've got a cam right here on this bow. This is the DFX cam on this Hoyt Hyper Edge. So DFX cam is not a super aggressive cam. It's their hunting cam. It's a very smooth cam. Especially if you run the 80% let off. You can get 65% let off for it too and make it more aggressive. But let's talk about this for a moment. Compare this to like a spiral cam. A spiral cam 65% let off. It's a little bit more aggressive design to be able to hold more weight throughout the draw cycle. And what that's going to do, it's going to change the way everything feels at full draw, and you're going to set them up differently based on what you like. Now for me, especially if I have a spiral cam, if I have that top draw stop on the top cam hitting first versus what the bottom cam is doing, then I have to keep pulling into that cable in order for that bottom cam to hit as well. And what that's going to do is take an already aggressive cam and it's going to make it even more aggressive, and that's really going to have you straining at full draw to hold on that target and really fighting that bow. And that can be an issue whenever you go with aiming, because you don't want to be struggling on target, you don't want to be fighting the bow, you want everything to work together. So on those, I have them hit together. Have them hit top cam is going to come around, it's going to hit that cable at the exact same time as that bottom cam is going to do. And what that allows me to do is to not have to pull through the cable, pull through the wall to get to a second draw stop, and it makes everything a lot smoother for me. It also gives me a little bit of room to expand throughout my shot, as my dynamic shot allows me to do, to be able to execute. Now let's talk about a complete opposite scenario. Let's look at a hunting type cam where it's got a high let off, low holding weight. Now a lot of times on these you'll find that the holding weight is too low and that the cam feels a little bit mushy on the back wall. And what you'll want to do on those is actually a lot of times have that top cam hit before your bottom cam. And the reason why I usually recommend having that top cam hit first is because it's going to go ahead and put a little bit of preload on the cables, and you're going to see a little bit less up and down as far as creep tuning goes. But what it's also going to do is force you to pull through onto that cable to get that bottom draw stop to hit, and it's going to give you a little bit more holding weight and a little bit more resistance, and that's going to keep you active in the shot. It's going to keep you steadier on target. So really just have to play around with that. And I'll preface this with saying, I make all my adjustments on my bow to make it hold on target before I do my tuning. And there are sacrifices that I take. Sometimes I want a bow to hold better on target versus tune better in a certain aspect, but because it will hold better on target, I'll score better with it. Same thing like with the spiral cam. I'm going to lose a little bit of creep tune accuracy because of having that draw stop on the top cam and the bottom hitting at the same time. But what I will do is gain accuracy on my hold on target that's well going to be above what I'd get from that creep tuning, because it's going to be within a half a twist or less, and it's not going to affect it that much. So the third thing I'm going to do is going to involve stabilizers. Now I'm going to set up my stabilizer a little bit differently than a lot of people think about, but I do it in a way that's going to help me aim on target. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bow and I'm going to see how it weights and how it balances with nothing on it, no stabs. A lot of times I'll even take the sight off. Sometimes I'll leave it on if it's what I'm going to run, just depending on the situation. But I'm going to hold that bow out in front of me and I want to see what it does. So if I let this go without forcing anything with the grip and leaving it there, I can see where it tilts back to. Now this isn't bad. It's a pretty neutral setting for a bow and it's pretty normal. I've had bows in the past, the way they were designed, they would rock all the way back 180 degrees and come back and I'd have to catch them. Now on a bow that comes back that far, you're gonna need more front weight. So that means two things, either having a longer front rod or a shorter back rod. And that's what's gonna keep everything a little bit better balanced out and keep you from having to deal with an excessive amount of weight in one spot or the other, and maybe getting over what you need for your total weight that you can hold up on target. Second thing I'll do with that is add my stabilizers on, and I'll go up through my stabilizer routine. That's in my instructional video that I have, and it's also an article that I wrote, has a lot of that information too. I'll put a link for both in the description so that you can see it, and I'll go over the talking points here as to how I set them up. Alright, so to keep things short and brief, let's just look at the way that I have my bow balanced. This is with my stabilizers on it, and completely like I would shooting it. This is going to be vertical, I'm going to let go. And you're going to see it drops forward just a little bit. It tilts forward. Why do I have it tilt forward? Well, for one, when you go to draw your bow back and you're holding it back at full draw, you're changing the forces on that bow from where it is at brace. So it's going to bring that front end up a little bit more. The other aspect of this is I want my front end to be heavy enough and have enough front bias on it that it's going to force me to hold my bow arm up. I don't need it to force me to hold it up so bad that I'm shaking or it's uncomfortable, but I want a little bit of tension to where that I can activate these muscles to actually hold that bow up on target. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to use my core strength and stability to keep that pin or keep my dot in the middle, versus having a bow that's completely balanced and just kind of wavers around. Any little movements that I do is going to affect that. I like to be an active shot and a dynamic shot, and that means putting a force for your energy in a certain direction. And that's why I have my bow set to where I have to hold my arm up like this to be able to keep my dot on target. And that's going to take me right into the next one. Alright guys, so the next thing we want to talk about is our loop and the height and relation it is on our bow. So when we look at a bow, we have more string up on top than we do on bottom, or more string on bottom than we do on top, versus our loop. And what that means for us is it's going to change the pulling points. You move that loop higher up on the string, you're going to pull back from the top more. You move it lower on the string, you're going to pull back from the bottom more. So what I like to do is be able to draw and aim on target and just hold there and not shoot, and just see what my natural tendencies are. Put a little bit of pressure on my back wall, be dynamic through my shot. Adding that pressure, it lifts everything up or it lowers it down, but I want to check and see what's happening. Now I went in depth on this on my last instructional video. I'll put a link to that in the description, but the long and short of this is the same as what I do with my stabilizers. I want it to have a direction for my energy. So I set my loop up to where if I'm not pulling or if I'm not doing anything with my bow arm, that dot is actually going to drop below the center of the target. So that's going to force me to have to hold my bow arm up. And what that's going to do is allow me to be more dynamic and allow me to have a direction for my energy to hold that dot in the middle. And I know that if it's not there, then I'm doing something wrong with my shot. I need to let down and I need to start over. A lot of times that means that I'm losing tension in my back for some reason. I'm not pulling through, I'm collapsing, or something's going on because I don't have that steady pressure to hold my bow, the dot, and my bow arm up in the center of the target. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, holding weight. And no, not holding the bow up weight. That's a whole different subject. What I want to talk about is the actual weight that you're holding back on the bow at full draw. Now this can be a big factor that a lot of people overlook to be able to help them be steadier on target. Now what we want to look at when this is going on is what our float picture looks like versus what we're doing. Let's say you get and you're holding on target and everything is really loose and floating around kind of funny, and then you can pull on your release a little bit and kind of spread and expand your body out. That extra weight that you're pulling on it, if it gets to be too much and you're kind of really having to over exaggerate that, but it steadies your sight pin up, that means you need more holding weight. A lot of times what holding weight's going to do is it's going to help you engage your muscles. It's also going to help you have something pulling against you to try to collapse your body in on itself, to make you have to pull outwards to expand that body out. And that's exactly like what I was talking about before. It's giving a direction for the energy, it's pulling yourself out, it's giving your body a motion to do, and what that's doing is it's adding a stability factor into your shot. Now let's say it's complete opposite. Let's say you have a bow with a really high holding weight, maybe a very aggressive cam, kind of like a spiral cam or something similar to that. And let's say you're holding on target and you're having to pull really hard and it feels like you're having to fight and struggle, but if you let up just a little bit, then you notice that everything kind of calms down a little bit. Now a situation like that, draw length being correct, then that's going to mean that you have too much holding weight and you need to dial that down a little bit to be able to help you hold steadier on target. And that's something for a lot of people to play around with. And what I found is most people hold not enough weight. You don't need to have anything crazy. You don't need to be holding 25, 27, 28, 30 pounds. Most people aren't going to be able to get away with that. But I'd say anywhere between the 15 and the 20 pound range, usually around that 17 pound area, that's going to hit for the majority of people in a good range for an adult to be able to hold steadiest on target and have a little bit of resistance against themselves. That's something to play around with and something to look at. It all goes down to how you're going to adjust your cams and the way that you're going to form fit everything to customize your bow. Alright, so one of the things that I find most important on your shot is your timing. Now you notice on that shot, and pretty much any one that I do whenever I'm having a good day, is going to shoot somewhere in that 7-second range. That's how I've built up my shot timing. And the reason I've found that is by studying my float. And I've done videos in the past about this, but if you can study your float, you can watch your shot timing, and you can be able to see when you're most steadiest. And you're going to have some times where your sight pin almost completely stops, or it does slow down and get the smallest on target. And what you need to do is develop your shot timing around that, whether that be with the hinge release and the timing on it, or a thumb release, the pressure that you have to place into that button to get it to fire, or even on that index release, the pressure that it takes on that finger to be able to pull that trigger back and trip the shot. All that's going to be a way to help you with your aiming on target, and really just a way to help you be able to shoot tighter groups on target, because you're not working against your body and its natural tendencies. What you're doing is allowing your natural tendencies in your body to work for you, and that's a big factor. Alright, so the very last thing that I'm going to talk about today, and our 7th tip on helping you aim better on target, is probably the biggest one of all. Don't over aim. Everybody does that. Everybody thinks that they have to put a chokehold on their pin or their dot and try to hold it dead center on target, and that's all they focus on is, I've got to hold that pin dead still, got to hold the pin dead still. It may lead to target panic in a very worst case scenario, or in a very least case scenario, it just has erratic grouping on target. You almost become a scenario like a puncher would. When you're on, you're going to be great. When you're off, you're really horrible. So what we need to do is be able to find a happy medium to be able to help you. And what I've done is I've developed something that I used myself, is what's called subconscious aiming. And what that allows me to do is be able to place my dot on target and use all the other 6 tips that we've talked about throughout this video to be able to help it stay in the middle, and trust that it's going to stay there, because I put in the work to be able to do that, to make it stay in the middle. And as long as I do that, I have much more consistent groupings on target. In fact, a lot of the times I'll have my shot break, and in my mind I'll think, man, that was off, that was left, that was right, whatever it was, and I'll actually see it hit the target, or I'll look at it when I get down to the target, and it'll be in the middle of the group just like with the rest of them. And what that is because your brain is controlling your muscle movements, and the amount of time that it would take us to be able to process what we're seeing versus having the reaction with our muscle movement, it's already going to be in a whole different spot. So when we go to force through that and we go to try to force our aim on there and we see that dot moving left, if we tell ourselves it's moving left, I need to move it right, force yourself to move to the right, and then try to time that, all we've done is, you know, work against our subconscious. Our mind knows that it needs to move right. It knows it needs to come back to the middle. So if we try to force it, we're going to overcorrect and we're going to pull it off to the right even more. And then it's going to be a back and forth scenario. It's, oh, I need to move back to the left. So all you need to do is just place that dot in the middle, let it float around on its natural float pattern, whatever that may be, because you're already going to know that because you're used to seeing it, and work through your shot. Trust your shot, trust your form, and trust all the tips that we use in this video to help you aim better, and you'll be able to have better groups, just like the ones that I've shot here on this video at 90 meters, to be able to keep you in the center. Hey everybody, thanks for watching the video today. As always, you know, thumbs up if you like it, subscribe to me if you don't already so you can keep an eye out for some more of these that I put out each week and some in between. And also, I'm going to put a code down in the description below for a company that I've partnered with for a 20% discount. It's going to be for Archery Squad, and that's a company that started out in the NAS program. That's basically a youth program throughout our schools. I really like what the company stands for. I'm going to put a link to their website on there so that you can be able to go through it, read their about page, see how they started. It was really impressive to me, and it's a really good group of people. Again, I appreciate you watching the video. Keep an eye out for some more coming out. I'll see you soon.